You're seeing Venezuela back in the headlines, but what's really going on? To understand it, we have to look past the breaking news. This isn't some sudden crisis. It's what happens when decades of political decisions, economic collapse, and international pressure all collide. Believe it or not, Venezuela was once one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America. Its entire economy was built on one thing: oil. For years, high oil prices funded massive social programs, generous subsidies, and a powerful central government. But that total dependence came with a huge risk. When global oil prices crashed, Venezuela had no backup plan. Oil production plummeted, corruption ran wild, and heavy government control over industries scared away any new investment. Under President Hugo Chavez, the country adopted a centralized socialist model. When his successor, Nicolas Maduro, took over, he inherited an economy that was already cracking under the strain, and then he made it worse. Strict currency controls led to widespread shortages of everything from food to medicine. Price controls completely wiped out local businesses and farmers. And then came hyperinflation. Money became so worthless it was practically paper. As living conditions went from bad to worse, millions of Venezuelans were forced to flee their homes, creating one of the largest migration crises in the world. On the political front, power became more and more concentrated. Opposition leaders were arrested or exiled. Elections were widely disputed. The checks and balances that once existed were dismantled, with courts and institutions brought under firm government control. This is when the international community really started to pay attention. The United States and many other countries accused the Venezuelan government of authoritarianism and human rights abuses. This led to heavy sanctions targeting the country's oil exports, top government officials, and financial systems. Now, there are two sides to the sanctions debate. Supporters say they were necessary to pressure the leadership into making changes. Critics argue they ended up hurting ordinary people the most. The tough reality is, both of these things can be true. Sanctions did cut off a lot of the government's revenue. They also made the shortages and economic pain for everyday citizens much, much worse. In response, Venezuela strengthened its relationships with countries that oppose U.S. influence like Russia, China, and Iran. These alliances gave them some political cover and a little bit of economic help. But it was nowhere near enough to actually fix the underlying problems and stabilize the country. So why is Venezuela all over the news right now? Because the situation has reached a critical pressure point. The economic desperation is still there. The political legitimacy of the government is still in question. Millions of people are still displaced. At the same time, global events like shifts in the energy market and geopolitical rivalries have made Venezuela strategically important once again. For the United States, Venezuela is a major concern. It's geographically close. It sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves, and its crisis directly impacts migration across the entire region. For other global powers, Venezuela is a symbol of resistance to American influence in its own backyard. While this turns Venezuela's internal crisis into a major geopolitical issue. Recent diplomatic moves and military posturing have raised fears of escalation. Maybe not a full-scale war, but the risk of increased intervention, pressure, and instability is very real. Inside Venezuela, daily life is still a struggle. People deal with constant shortages, failing infrastructure, and suffocating political tension. Outside the country, world leaders are trying to figure out how much pressure to apply and what the consequences of their actions will be. There's no simple fix here. If you remove the pressure, you might just strengthen the current leadership. If you increase it, you could make the humanitarian crisis even worse. Any kind of sudden intervention could throw the entire region into chaos. So what's really happening in Venezuela? It's a country trapped between its past reliance on oil, a shattered economy, political deadlock, and global powers using it as a pawn on a strategic chessboard. This crisis didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to be solved overnight either. Thanks for watching. If you want to understand more about the complex forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.